The Bum by Don Shea. Read by Bobby Deluxe. Harsh gravel ground into the palms of Perry Walsh's hands and grated against his cheek. Searing pains chased each other through his neck and down into his chest. 3 bullet holes can cause a lot of pain. It was death-like still in the alley after the thundering of the guns and the metallic patter of running feet. The 3 thugs had fled, leaving him to die. The first trickling of a crowd was beginning to gather, their feet scraping on the gravel, their awed voices low. "He's unconscious," a voice from the crowd came to him dimly. "Look at his lips move. He thinks he's fighting a fight, I guess." Thinks he's fighting a fight. That was a laugh, just like a fight fan. This was the toughest fight he'd ever had. He'd better get to work before the kid stabbed him to death with that left. What round was this? The 4th? 6 more rounds, about 25 more minutes to go. The cocky youngster glided toward him behind that razor-sharp left hand, darting in and out and circling to his left, jarring his left and effortlessly backed by a smooth fighting machine. Mike Travis was pretty good. Lean, a hard young battler, a fancy pants with an unmarked face, a tanned, glistening body bouncing another step toward the championship. Perry Walsh trailed him closely, patiently rationing his strength until the kid committed a technical mistake, delayed a fraction of a step and sliding out of a corner. Perry looped a whistling left hook into his body that should have dulled some of his spark but didn't. The youngster drove needlepoint lefts into his face, stinging, sneered as he spun to the left out of range, away from the ropes, back to the middle of the ring. Perry Walsh grinned at Travis, tight mental check rein on his temper. He must hold his temper this time. He'd promised Florence, his wife. The throbbing in the back of his head had quieted now. Only the sharp knives in his throat and chest were left. It was chilly. Mike Travis moved toward him again, the slight sneer still on his smooth face, confident behind that sniping left hand. He isn't punching at me, Perry realized. He's walloping at my temper. Perry, half crouched, shuffled forward, let a hail of jabs rattle high across his forehead, and bullied his man into the ropes. He ground a half-dozen murderous lefts and rights into Travis's belly before they clinched, and as the referee worried them out of it, a backhand flick slapped sweat into his eyes, a deliberate foul. Perry grinned. With the bell, Travis dropped his gloves and headed toward his corner, a swagger in his walk, because the championship was 1 round nearer. Perry turned to his corner more slowly, economizing on strength, and sat down. Buzz, his second, sloshed water into his mouth. Hard hands lifted his chest to make room for deep gulps of air. Perry casually gazed out into the smoky dimness. A full house. His cut would be a good one, and he needed it. Lots of shoes for baby, he thought, and pictured his wife listening to the radio, alone, anxious, pulling for him not to go crazy again. Little Katie would be asleep in her crib. It was still early in the evening when he and Dick had sat down at one of the tables in his little restaurant to count the day's receipts. Dick ran the place for him. It was deserted when the 3 robbers had walked in, guns gripped tight in their hands, coat collars turned up. He felt good, strong as he sat in his corner. Buzz was working him over hard, kneading his legs. His eyes wandered out over the crowd again. The dirtiest man in the ring, they called him. The Bum. Well, what the hell? Why not, he thought for so many years. He'd been born into dirt, the filth of the East Side. When he was 9, life had taught him how to fight life, with every weapon on hand. Fists, feet, brains, and even clawing fingernails. After a gang of street toughs broke his nose with a blackjack, stole his clothes, and left him naked in the gutter. At 11, he had discovered he had an ally, an ungovernable temper which shot dynamite into his hard fists and coated pain with a dulling redness. The magnet of money had lured him into the ring, and fans such as these had poured more into his pockets. They booed him. They hated him. But they came to see him fight. Because when he got mad, he forgot the rules. Forgot he was fighting a foe with padded gloves and was battling in the streets again for his life. Sure, he'd been kicked out of rings. Plenty. In California, he was barred for life. But he was a good fighter, almost a great fighter. For the past year, he had stood as the insurmountable obstacle between all comers and the title. The champion of the champion, always the challenger, but never the champ. But now he was through as a dirty fighter. He smacked his wine-red gloves together in grim determination, glared at the crowd. Just this one last good, clean fight against Mike Travis tonight. He'd prove he could fight clean. He and Dick had half risen in surprise when the three thieves walked in. One of them had grated, "All right, you guys, up against that wall and no monkey business." Dick, old and cautious, had backed against the wall, hands raised over his head. Perry moved slowly, fighting the temper which choked him. "You'll never get away with this," he growled. One of the robbers had made a menacing gesture with his gun. Travis moved into him cautiously. He would be cautious. His midriff glowed red from the pounding he'd been sucked into during the last round, but it hadn't slowed his blinding speed. That rapier left just made him doubly cautious, even sharper. Walsh didn't like Travis. This guy would fight dirty given the chance, and a dirty fighter had no place in the ring. He should know. He thought of Florence. "Promise me," she'd pleaded a couple days ago. "Promise me you'll keep your temper in the ring and out." And he'd promised. Travis's left jabs were small charges of dynamite exploding in Perry Walsh's face, and he worked in close. But Travis locked his elbows and butted him sharply with his head, starting blood flowing from a small cut under the eye. The referee didn't see the foul. Perry ignored it and clipped Travis alongside the chin, drawing from his deep reservoir of hard-earned experience to shake one hand free, but he didn't hurt Travis. The kid went on his bicycle again, circling to the left and pecking open that cut beneath Perry's eye. Slowly, the cut grew, and the blood flowed more freely. Suddenly, a left hook swished into Perry's groin, low. It didn't hurt him or slow him, and the referee warned Travis, but Perry knew that wouldn't stop these tactics. A film as red as the blood smeared across his cheeks slowly rose in Perry. He was getting the business. The old crimson tide of ungovernable anger welled within him. His eyes narrowed to twin slits. Then he suddenly stopped his forward rush as he remembered Florence. He halted for a moment, shaken, then moved into Travis more confidently. He had beaten the thing and could have hit Travis out of sheer joy after the bell if the youngster hadn't suddenly sat down. Perry realized Travis had cleverly worked him into his own corner just as the bell rang, but he didn't care. He was inwardly glowing proudly as he strode across the ring to his corner. He lay back. Buzz leaned close to his ear. "Better get going. This guy's giving you the works." Perry nodded, grinned at him, then smiled and waved at Travis across the ring. Buzz's mouth fell open in astonishment. A surprised murmur ran through the crowd. Perry chuckled. Florence would appreciate that. The three thieves had him covered cold. He knew that. Well, let them have the money, which was little enough, he thought. Then Dick, in his confusion, had allowed his hands to drop. One of the thugs had half-whirled and crashed his pistol barrel alongside the old man's head, crumbling him to the floor. Then Perry knew what he had to do, and he was proud that he did it coldly and not in anger. One quick step had carried him to the nearest man. A hard right knocked him across a table. Perry spun around toward the others. Guns roared. One slug had smashed into his neck. He'd staggered back as another had blasted into his chest. Perry kept his eyes on the timekeeper and was out of his corner with the bell. Buzz was yelling at his back for him to bore in, to infight. The kid tossed some rights hard and sharp. Perry worked over his stomach with both hands before switching to a clean uppercut. He was feeling good now and getting stronger. The sweat rolled freely, lubricated his big muscles. Travis took a lesson from what had happened before when he tried to swap punches, and went back to his educated left hand, unstitching the cut under Perry's eye. Perry grinned at these tactics. Travis circled, always backing away to his left, and Walsh deliberately stopped in the middle of the ring and waved him in. But Travis merely spat out a foul word which Perry couldn't identify. Then the kid moved in swiftly to bounce two knife-like lefts off the cut again. The youngster was working even faster now, swift like a collie, in and out. What round was it? 8th round? Perry wasn't sure. It was a good, hard fight. He went after Travis, blocking him into a corner while his eyes sopped up a dozen of those snake-like left hands. Blood flowed freely now, and Travis was trying to outmaneuver him, to stagger him with the right cross and dance free. Perry knew the punch was coming, flexed his knees slightly to let it slide past his jaw over his left shoulder, and then curved a looping left hook against Travis's ribs. Travis grunted and scowled, smashed a hard right below the belt. It hurt, but Perry only grinned at him. He had that temper situation well in hand now. The kid finally worked out of the trap back into the middle of the ring. Perry had remained standing, his legs spread far apart, weaving slightly, a dazed look in his eyes. From the floor, the third bandit had propped himself on an elbow to pump another bullet just below Perry's heart. Then the bandits had fled, racing into the street. Perry had staggered to the open door after them. They were running up the alley alongside the building. Perry had followed a few weak steps, then had collapsed in the gravel. Travis was there in front of him, always stabbing, moving away from Perry's right hand, his chin hidden behind a raised left shoulder. He was tough and fast, all right. The blood ran into Perry's eye again, and he cocked his head to see. Travis roughed him in the clinches, and he was proud of his ability to curb the instinct to reply with similar tactics, to refrain from grating the laces across Travis's face, or to clip him with an elbow. Perry ducked his head and bored in. That round was even, maybe a shade on his side. He was breathing hard, but the pace was telling on Travis, too. A hard red lump was raised on one cheek, one eye was dark and his ribs would ache, but every wallop still had plenty of sting. Between the rounds, Perry sat and chuckled at the fight he was making. What a field day the sports writers would have. He could see the headlines. "Dirty fighter gives technique a bath." He chuckled again. Buzz worked on the bad eye so he could see, and Perry asked himself if he could somewhere find something deep down within himself this last round to score a knockout, wind up his career with a big noise. With the bell, he rose slowly, cold, calculated, untouched by the drug of anger which had won him previous battles. He accepted Travis's straight left jabs with disdain, crowded beneath the flurry of whip-like blows to rip home a short right, another one, and a left. The crowd rose with a roar. Perry moved into the kid, forced him across the ring, ripped across his middle with piston-like precision, switching to his face. Travis fought back hard, his breath whistling, jabbing, crossing. Perry took a faceful of punishment to get Travis where he couldn't circle, and he rocked him with a right hook to the jaw and dropped his left fist halfway to the wrist into his body. Travis staggered, quickly recovered, and fought back with dogged ferocity. Both were battling now, their hardest. Travis forgot his jabs as they squared away in the center of the ring. And head burrowed between his thick shoulders, Perry answered him with flying fists. Dimly, through the great pain, he could hear the screaming of an ambulance siren in the distance. Travis folded quickly. Perry ripped a short left into his solar plexus and left him gasping. The kid's hands dropped. Perry splashed rights and lefts into his face, drove him across the ring. A crisp left hook straightened Travis up, and a whistling right uppercut dropped him for a 9 count. He struggled to his knees, raised one foot under him, then sprawled forward on his face. Perry was exultant as he slipped through the ropes, bathrobe thrown over his shoulders, the tumult of the mob roaring in his ears. He couldn't wait to phone Florence, to hear her happy congratulations over not losing his temper. He was going to retire after a good, clean fight. The gravel was still harsh against his palms, but strangely, his throat and chest no longer hurt. Then his hands clawed at the alleyway one last time. A dull voice in the crowd spoke, but he didn't hear the words. Cripes, what a tough break. And over such a little bit of dough, too. He would have made 100 times that fighting Mike Travis tomorrow night. He must have lost his temper to get shot up like that. He never could keep his temper. The end. Thanks for listening.